Avalon Cablevision proudly presents for its fourth consecutive season, Sports Personalities. And now here's your host, Ted Patey.
Our guest tonight on Sports Personalities was an outstanding soccer player in the Burin Peninsula Soccer League with the St. Lawrence Laurentians. He has played on an all-Newfoundland title and has played on no less than 4 consecutive provincial senior championships. Twice named the MVP in the Burin Peninsula Soccer League, and he has won the scoring championship no less than 6 times. Joining us tonight on Sports Personalities is Reg Farrell. Reg, welcome to Sports Personalities, and it's just a great pleasure to have such an athlete on our show.
Thank you, Ted.
Reg, doing research on your sports career, you started out at an early age in the Senior Soccer League on the Burin Peninsula at age 14. You remember your first game?
Oh, yes. I guess what I remember most about it is being asked to play. And I guess that was probably the biggest thrill, at least in my soccer career at that point. Just the fact that I had a chance to play with players that I had been going in to watch for so many years. It was about mid-season, and they had difficulty for some reason or other of getting a full complement to go to Burin to play a game. So the coach of the team, Bill Slaney, came and asked me the afternoon of the game if I would go down to Burin and play. And of course, I jumped at the first opportunity I had.
Mm-hmm. And of course, that first game was, you had 2 big goals in that game. And
yes, I was very fortunate. I did manage to get 2 goals in my first game, and it was a great start. It certainly gave me a lot of confidence right from the beginning, and whereas I considered myself privileged just to have the opportunity to play with some of those fellas, when I went out and scored a couple of goals, it certainly made me relax and made me feel that that I could play there as well.
And pretty good for a soccer player, 14 years old in the senior league, scoring 2 goals.
Yeah.
Reg, before you jumped into the senior league at an early age, I don't think you had any what you call organized soccer. It was just something called meadow soccer.
Basically, yes. This is where we played most of our ball up to that point. Well, meadow soccer was just kids who would get together and organize their own recreation. And since soccer was the sport on the Burin Peninsula, and I guess there has hardly been any other sport in St. Lawrence even to this day of any significance, soccer was the sport that we played. And wherever there was a meadow, wherever there was a grass that was mowed or grass perhaps that didn't get a chance to grow, we went and played on it as long as we could daily.
Mm-hmm. You remember your first coach?
Oh yes, my first coach was Bill Slaney, who Bill was a former player, a former captain of St. Lawrence team, quite a player in his own right, I might add.
The following year, Reg, a string of injuries that would plague your soccer career, not to the extent where you couldn't score a goal like you did, but what happened in that first injury?
Well, it started with at that time, the various communities and schools on the Burin Peninsula would have a sports day as one of the concluding events of the school year. There would be track and field events, and of course the day was usually highlighted with a soccer match between the 2 top teams. There would be a playoff of the regional playoffs. St. Lawrence would play Lawn or Burin on the east side of the peninsula. On the west side of the peninsula, Fortune Grand Bank would play, and then the winner would meet on Sports Day. So on the eve of Sports Day, we were in having our final practice or rehearsal for the big game. And in those days, we had the big boots. I don't know if you've seen them or not. The high boot would come up wrap around your ankle, and it had leather bottoms, and the clogs on them or cleats were leather as well. So I had just had mine tapped with new cleats on them, and I was about to save them for the big game. And I went into practice with a pair of sneakers on. And I think it was probably the last play of the practice session when we were trying a corner kick. And Mike Quirk, our goaltender at the time, and I collided. Mike had boots and I had sneakers, and resulted in my broken toe.
Reg, you mentioned Grand Bank now. early soccer on the Burin Peninsula was dominated by Grand Bank, and when St. Lawrence started to win a few games and started to become a dominant power, a bitter rivalry was taking place there between St. Lawrence and Grand Bank, right?
Well, ever since, in my memory anyway, St. Lawrence and Grand Bank were chief rivals. When I was a child growing up in St. Lawrence, I think it's fair to say that St. Lawrence was the dominant power. We were the second team in Newfoundland to win the provincial championship. Holy Cross was the first. And in the early and mid-50s, St. Lawrence dominated the Burin Peninsula, although there was quite a keen competition with Grand Bank. In the late 50s and early 60s, Grand Bank had an edge on us. And we were always, in there, one or the other. But for those years, Grand Bank were really dominant.
And St. Lawrence won their first peninsula, soccer title in '59. And that following year, Reg, where Grand Bank wanted to become the dominant force or supremacy in soccer, the rivalry really heated up.
Oh yes, there's no question. We won the Peninsula Championship in '59 and represented the Peninsula in Corner Brook. The Guards won the championship that year. The following year, Grand Bank won I think they won the Provincial Championship. I think they beat St. Pat's here in St. John's. And I also think that was the first championship that Grand Bank won.
Mm-hmm. And of course, as you know, violence became commonplace between the games, St. Lawrence and Grand Bank. Fights broke out between the fans, and play was rough on the field. And of course, I think we're getting into the big riot.
Yes, there was hardly a game, particularly where St. Lawrence and Grand Bank was involved, where there wasn't a fight would break out either between players and fans, or fans from both sides. I would have to say, though, that the greatest problem was more so with the fans than with the players. The players, played hard. Nobody drew back or anything, and played, for the most part, the game the way the game should be played. However, the fans really were the ones, I think, who got on to the violent aspect of it more so than the players. Although it did spread over to the players somewhat, there had been a number of heated encounters at various games over those few years.
Of course, in 1961, it got so bad where the season wasn't even finished due to the riots and the fights.
Well, we were playing in Grand Bank. We had played the previous year. At that time, I was playing senior and junior, as well as Cyril Quirk and Bob Slenny and Frank Tobin. We had played the previous night, I think, in St. Lawrence. There was an altercation where I think two players were ejected for fighting, and it continued behind the goal, and a number of fans got into it. So the next night, the senior team played in Grand Bank, and I think there was a carryover there into that next game, and the game was going very well. As a matter of fact, if I recollect, I think Grand Bank, if they had completed the game, would have won the championship that year. They were leading us with maybe about 10 or 15 minutes left in the game when the fight started on the field, and I guess there was a number of anxious spectators there who wanted to become part of it, and within a matter of minutes the field was just crowded with fans, and it could have been quite a nasty scene. Thank God nobody was seriously hurt there.
Of course, you got jeered quite a bit by the fans, being a junior age player and playing senior, especially playing a senior game, then going back and playing junior, I guess.
Well, when I started in '57, there was no junior league on the Burin Peninsula. The first Burin Peninsula Junior League, I think, was in 1959. So that was my third senior year. So you can appreciate the situation that the Grand Bank fans, I guess, were in when they had seen me going there and playing junior, and then 3 years later, or playing senior, for 3 years, and then later, they saw me playing junior. Well, there's always an argument over the age of individuals. We had that this summer with the World Cup here in St. John's.
And of course, Reg, the following season, '61, St. Lawrence sat out the season just so some of the bitterness between the two towns could subside, and I think you played exhibition games all in '61, did you not?
That's right. Our '61 season consisted mostly of our practicing. I think we were too much involved in the game, at least the players, to just give it up. We did, at that time, though, lose a number of our veteran players who had probably reached a point, you know, where they had played for so many years that they had had enough anyway, particularly when it came to what it did come to. But, you know, there was a lot of young fellows there in their late teens and early 20s who still had a lot of soccer left in them, and they didn't want to give it up. So we continued to practice and get games where we could. We played many exhibition games with Lawn, who were just 8 or 9 miles away. We played exhibition games with visiting teams on their way to St. Pierre, St. John's teams. We also played exhibition games with St. Pierre, both in St. Pierre and in St. Lawrence.
Mm-hmm. Of course, Reg, one of your biggest disappointments came in '65. What happened?
Well, that was the year we were playing guards for the provincial championship. At the time, I was studying in Ottawa. I had to leave before the season, or before the series was complete, to register for my courses for that year. It wasn't something that I had anticipated. The season or the series got extended due to poor weather conditions. Had it gone ahead as scheduled, even to the full extent of the series, the 3 games, I would have made it. But the weather cancellation sort of played havoc with it.
That was a disappointment for you. But then, the following 4 years, you were on 4 provincial senior championships, so that had to make up for the disappointment in '65.
Oh yes, no question about it. Then things started to fall into place. It probably was a pretty rough start and a rocky road, I guess, when we started off at the senior level anyway. But I think there was a number of factors came into play. We were all maturing. I say we, you know, I guess what was to be the nucleus of the St. Lawrence team for a number of years, and I include fellows like I mentioned before, like Cyril Quirk, Bob Slaney, and Frank Tobin, Norm Kelly, and Gerald Fitzpatrick, my brother Carl, and a few others who at that time were just reaching their prime, and they formed the nucleus of the St. Lawrence team during the late 60s.
And of course, then in '67, Reg, another injury hampered your career for a little while. I understand you picked up a broken wrist.
Yes, and that was a peculiar one too. It was the beginning of the season, the first game of the season, which was an all-star game. We were the defending Burin Peninsula champions. At that time, the defending champion started the season, or the season opened with the defending champion playing an all-star contingent. The purpose, or one of the purposes of the game, was to raise money for an insurance policy for injured players. So ironically, the game in which I was playing for insurance purposes just happened to be the game in which I was injured.
Mm-hmm. Well, Reg, we're going to have to wrap up now, and we haven't even gotten into your career when you moved to St. John's the following year, nor have we talked about your first Challenge Cup series, which is quite an exciting one. So would you be so kind to join me again next week, and we'll do part 2 of the Reg Farrell career?
Be glad to, Ted.
Okay, Reg, thanks. Our guest this week on Sports Personalities has been the Burin Peninsula soccer great Reg Farrell. We'll see you again next week for part 2 of that interview. Good night.
Avalon Cablevision proudly presents for its 4th consecutive season, Sports Personalities. And now here's your host, Ted Patey.
Well, good evening and welcome back to Sports Personalities, Part 2 of the Reg Farrell soccer story. Last week we brought you up through the Burin Peninsula Soccer League that Reg played in, and now we're going to go to his first Challenge Cup, and from there Reg moved to St. John's, and we'll talk about his soccer career here in St. John's. Reg, welcome back for the second week. We haven't moved from here, it's just that we're starting part 2 now. It might look like this is second week. It is second week, but it's part 2 of your series. Reg, talking about your first Challenge Cup. The first part of that series was just a breeze for St. Lawrence. You just rolled over Sydney, but then you went to Ontario, and that was the exciting one.
No question, the excitement was in Ontario. I often wish since then, though, that the second one had been in St. Lawrence or even in St. John's. You know, and one of the factors that when I say that, not that we had any problems playing away from home, that didn't intimidate us. But we had been accustomed at the time to playing on very small pitches. There wasn't a regulation-sized pitch in Newfoundland at the time. At least there wasn't one that was played for. That's not quite true. There was one in Cornerbrook, I understand, and I played a game there in '59. But in St. John's or the Burin Peninsula, the soccer pitches were very small. So when Sydney came down, I suppose they were probably intimidated a little bit by that as well. They were probably also intimidated when they come into a small community in Newfoundland and say perhaps close to 4,000 or more fans gathered around a small pitch. The particular series had been well publicized. It was the first time that Newfoundland had entered Challenge Cup. Very few, if any, Newfoundland teams had even played a team from outside the province up to that point. I know we hadn't, apart from St. Pierre. And there was a lot of excitement looming in Newfoundland generally and in the Burin Peninsula in particular. There was a lot of media coverage for the particular series. Both the TV cameras were there, the radio, the papers. It was quite an event and one which I'll always remember.
And of course, it was quite an exciting finish too, I understand.
Oh yes, no question. We won quite handily in St. Lawrence. We got off to a very early start and we never looked back. I remember I had just enrolled that year at Memorial for my final year. And I left on a Friday afternoon to drive down to St. Lawrence for the Saturday game, and I think it was the quickest time ever I went over that dirt road, which it was at the time, I'm telling you. And I wanted to get down to St. Lawrence that night for the final practice. We were playing the next day, but I wanted to get out and practice with the boys one last time before the big game. We went through Sydney really quite handily. I think the score was something like 9 or 10 to 3 or something like that. And from there we went the following week to Toronto, where we played Scarborough Ballymena. It was a team composed mostly of players who worked for Eaton's. And I think at the time, or at least what we were told afterwards, that a number of them had been imported by T. Eaton and Company to play soccer. When we went there, that didn't bother us. We didn't know that, of course, and we were coming from Newfoundland and quite proud to represent Newfoundland, and we went there to give it everything we had, which we did. However, when we got there, we played in a pitch much larger than anything that we had been accustomed to before. We were not permitted to practice on the pitch. We didn't even see the pitch before we got there. We were taken out in some park and given a piece of grass, much like the meadows we had played in previously in St. Lawrence, and told to go here and practice. So we had our practice, and when we went down to the game, we were playing at night under lights. And we hadn't played anything, I suppose, apart from 45s or 120 under lights before. And to have to go out and play a game of soccer, we were certainly put off our game at the beginning. And I suppose after about 10 minutes of play, they already had us about 2-0. The game ended up 3-2, and we came pretty close to pulling it out in the last couple of minutes of the game. The number of factors there, I guess, the lights, the size of the field, and perhaps the coaching as well may have been a factor. Our coaching was geared to the type of fields that we had. It was not geared to the type of competition that we were in, and it was not geared to the type of field that we were playing on. So that had to make a difference as well.
Now, Reg, the following year you moved to St. John's, but the first year you moved to St. John's, you still played the soccer season with St. Lawrence, and I think you played in one of the roughest, toughest series that was ever played, probably in the Burin Peninsula.
Yes, and I guess perhaps in Newfoundland as well. That was a quite competitive, quite a keen series. It was the second year that we had met the London Lions in provincial competition. The rivalry was very strong from the previous year. It had been a very close series in '67, and both teams were ready to go from the blow of the first whistle on that first game.
And of course, the old London Lions, I think they were formerly St. Pat's, and they had such soccer players. Well, you tell us, Bernie Bennett.
Well, Bernie and Joe were there, and in that particular series, I started as a centre forward, but before long I got moved back full-back by Jack Dunrick, my coach. So two fellows I had to keep an eye on at the time were Joe and Bernie. And needless to say, there was a few words and a few checks and so on exchanged between among the three of us. Others on the team were Dickie Barrett, Mike Maloney, Ron Rossiter.
Jack Power was there.
Jack Power was there, Earl McCurdy, Rich Croft was in goal. Well, they had quite a formidable team. The Bennett boys were all there, apart from Bernie. Well, I suppose if we look at two families, I guess it was mine and the Bennett family that at that time had quite a representation. My brother Carl played. I had a brother Keith who was a spare and a cousin Ray who was a spare. And there was Joe, Jerry, Bernie, and I think there was another brother who I don't recall now, an older one who also played volleyball. So there were four Bennetts there as well. Quite interesting.
And of course, being tough and rough and one of the hardest played, I think you just edged out the London Lions for the provincial championship.
Oh yeah, it was by narrowest of margins. I think there was two tied games, and we won, I think, by about 1 goal in the final game. It was sort of a series where no one gave an inch. It was hard. There was Dr. Hollywood in the nearby hospital was kept busy. It wasn't unusual at all to see a player go and return 15 or 20 minutes later. Some didn't return, and it was entertaining for the fans. It was enjoyable for the players too. But I have to say, despite the physical aspect of it, I don't recall one person taking any what I would consider to be a cheap shot at anyone.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Reg, in your soccer career took off in St. John's. You played with feelings and had a player coach and had great success.
Yes, I had a great bunch of boys in my first year. When I moved to St. John's, the previous year, just after we came back from Toronto, I had played with just a series with Memorial University, and got to know most of the players on that team played with Felians. So when I was making the move to St. John's, I looked at several teams, and the boys I played with at Memorial also played with Felians. I think that was probably the factor that attracted me to Felians more than anything else. The facilities, of course, as well, were an enticement.
And of course, a great team you had, because that first year, I understand you only lost 1 game, and that was to Montreal.
The only game we lost was to Montreal. It was for the Eastern Canada Championship. We had won the Atlantic Championship in Halifax, and we're playing Montreal at King George V in almost a hurricane. There was a tremendous windstorm, and they beat us by a score of 2-1. It was a bit of a heartbreaker, and but anyway, you have to take those with the glorious ones as well.
So you went on to play with Felians for how many years after that?
I played with Felians. That was really the only full season I had with Felians as a senior player. The next 2 years I played partial seasons. Again, I had recurring ankle injuries which forced me in a few years to retire.
Mm-hmm. And I think you were forced from competitive soccer, I think it was in '71, with torn ligaments in the ankle.
That's right. It had been recurring for a couple of years, and it looked like the ankles were pretty well gone at the time, so I decided to take it easy and get away from competitive soccer.
But then I understand that you went into intermediate soccer and was coaching some teams out here in the Ghouls.
It was about 4 years later. I had moved into the Ghouls at this time, and the 3rd division, the divisional setup, was started in Newfoundland then. And there was a group of men in the Ghouls who had initiated a team, and Gary Kavanagh, who was the coach of the team, had heard from someone I had played, and he came and asked me to play with them, and so I went up and I said, okay, I'll try it again, and I got back at it for another few years.
Mm-hmm. Reg, after such a great soccer career, Bjorn Peninsula and in St. John's, did you see any big changes from the time you started out, say, up to present day?
Well, there's a lot of changes. There was a number of changes in the format of the game changed over the years. We went from a senior league only to junior, then we got a minor system, which was great. There was no provincially organized minor system in the early days. The coaching improved. tremendously. The only coaching up until the time we became part of the Canadian Federation was, players who had played the game. They hadn't received any formal instruction. There was no such thing as coaching clinics in those days. And our game was, I guess, stagnant, at least stagnant in comparison to the rest of Canada and I guess to the rest of the world. A lot of people still say that our game was probably more exciting. And in some respects, I have a difficulty arguing with that. Because we had 11 players in a very small, restricted area. You had a lot of body contact, you had a lot of shots on goal, and it made the game perhaps more action-packed than today's game is. And the other aspect, I guess, will be the size of the field, which, that had to have a bearing on the way in which the game is played. If you got more space in which to operate, obviously, it's going to be a different operation than you're performing in a small area.
So what's Reg Soccer doing in sports today? Reg Farrell, what am I saying, Reg Soccer? What's Reg Farrell doing in soccer today?
Well, Ted, we may say I'm retired again. I've played a few games this year. For the last 5 or 6 years I've been playing at the Masters level and really enjoying it. Now the knees are causing problems. So I'm trying to stay with it as long as I can. I'm also coaching St. John Bosco High School team, so I'm still in contact.
You're a principal at the St. John Bosco High School, right?
If from time to time I take a team myself to coach.
Now you're saying you're coaching school hockey at St. John Bosco.
Soccer.
Soccer. I'm sorry. Do you see a lot of potential at the school with soccer players there?
The potential is there. There's no question about it. We suffer in the area from a lack of facilities, but the question, the potential is there. The kids are very keen, and I'm enjoying the season with them.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Reg coming from the Burin Peninsula, like St. Lawrence, for a dominant force. I guess you're really aware of Holy Cross going for their 10th straight senior local soccer title this year.
Oh yes, no question. I coached many of those boys as well. Johnny and Bill Breen, John Hearn, Dickie Power. I coached a lot of those fellows when they were under 18, and I also assisted Alan Ross in the preparation of the Canada Games team for the 1977 Canada Games. So the boys they've put a lot into the game, and they're deserving of what they've achieved.
Would you like to get back into coaching some senior league?
Yes, and probably sometime I will. Right now, I haven't made that commitment in a few years because it takes. I don't want to go at it unless I can go at it. What I mean by that is I don't want to do a half a job. If I'm going to coach a team, I'm going to coach a team. And if I coach a team, I want a team to play. And I got no time for, if a senior, going out for something that's purely recreation. Now, if that's a master level, that's fine. But if someone's going up for senior ball, then they have to make the commitment, I have to make it. And I haven't been able to do that with a young family in recent years.
Well, Reg, we'll close on that note, and it's been a pleasure talking to you for the past 2 weeks, and certainly an enjoyable interview, finding out really about your soccer career on the Burin Peninsula and in St. John's. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ted.
Our guest this week and last week, Part 1, Part 2 series on the Reg Farrell soccer story. That's it for this week. See you next week. Good night.